The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to North Warwickshire for the first time in quite a long time. It seems like a long time ago since I did Curdworth, which was the last one you saw in this series. Well, we've done 5 up to now. We're going to double our number by the end of this week. We're going to have 10 by the end of this week. Now for the first 2, I'm combining them together into one walk. But before we can actually go walking, we actually have to see some bits and bobs which are to the north of the first village. Here behind me you can see the church, which is kind of out on a limb. We'll explain why it's out on a limb as we take a walk around the parish of Grendon. Grendon, Green Hill. North Warwickshire returns to your screens this week as we hit the parish of Grendon between Atherstone and Polesworth. This one sits beside the River Anker and the Coventry Canal. You can reach it easily from the A5, and once you're in you find a village that spreads out in little pockets. The name Grendon goes right back to Anglo-Saxon times. It likely meant a green hill or maybe a green valley, which fits the early layout of the land. Before the Norman conquest it was held by a thane called Seward Barn. Grendon began in the Kingdom of Mercia, long before the Domesday Book. In 1086 the land was taken by Henry de Ferrers and listed with a mill, meadows and woodland. The de Grendon family held it next before the Chetwynds came along from the 1300s onwards. Coal mining arrived later, bringing new houses and new work. By the 1950s, New Grendon grew fast, and that's why now Grendon is mainly based around Watling Street. It's where the old Boot Inn once stood, along with the former Black Swan. The older part of Grendon still has older landmarks that stand out. All Saints Church has parts from the 1100s, a rebuilt tower from 1845 and a churchyard full of centuries of history. Grendon Bridge, with its 4 arches over the Anker, may date to the 1400s. Between the two is Bradley Green Wharf on the Coventry Canal, with its 1800s warehouse and its amazingly beautiful Bridge 48. As for Grendon Hall, that's long gone, but its ice house and its old estate traces still survive. Grendon's tales mostly come from its wartime moments. The ice house at Grendon Hall became an air raid shelter, and locals remember the night a German bomb landed about a mile away, leaving a huge crater. Also during World War II, a local bakery even fed German prisoners of war. The Chetwynd family, above all, were the most notable residents, running the estate for generations and hosting important visitors, including the Prince of Wales. Later, Frank Haynes became a well-known figure on the grounds, managing the estate after the hall was dismantled in 1933. Recent years have brought plenty of change. The Boot Inn closed in 2017 and became a co-op. The Black Swan site became a Costa after a planning appeal, sparking debate about traffic and the impact on the A5. Flooding has also been a concern. So that's Grendon. Old lanes, old bridges, new shops, new estates, and a past that still sits just under the surface. You've got Domesday fields, Victorian stonework, canal routes, wartime memories, and modern builds all packed into one place. Let's see it all.
Hi everyone, here's what I have on offer for you today. I'll be mostly active in the older part of Grendon, the bit with the canal, the church and what remains of the hall. I'll also be on Gatons.
Okay, so we've driven to our start point, which is the church in Grendon, which is a long way away from the actual village. We'll discover why that's the case in a little while. But let's get started with this. It's nice and shady here, which is a good thing, because like I said, it's going to be really, really warm today. So there's the church in those trees. Let's head through the gate and have a look.
All Saints Church is one of the oldest landmarks Grendon has. It has parts that go right back to the 1100s. The chancel was rebuilt in the early 1200s, and the north aisle and the arcade followed soon after. The south aisle came in during the early 1300s. The Civil War hit this church hard. The spire came down in the 1600s and smashed the south transept as it fell. That's why the tower looks a little chopped off today. The tower we see now was rebuilt in 1845, and a big Victorian makeover in the 1850s fixed the south transept and the Littleworth aisle. The outside is mostly sandstone, with a mix of rubble, ashlar and neat courses. The roofs sit low behind parapets. The chancel has old buttresses, slim lancets, and a big round arch window. The south porch, from 1820, has blind lancets and a chunky doorway. Inside, the church is plastered and calm, with shallow roofs and neat ribs. There are old commandment boards, twisted altar rails, a 1600s pulpit, 2 fonts, and a grand pew from 1618 that once sat in Stafford. The Chetwynd Chapel has a big screen with angels, urns, and carved arches. The churchyard holds graves from the 1600s onwards, including miners from the 1882 Baddesley pit explosion. Around the site are earthworks, platforms, and pottery that point to a lost settlement. Archaeology in 2015 found grave cuts, a sandstone wall, voussoirs, and more disturbed burials.
Now, if you go to the back of the churchyard, which is currently where I'm standing here, and look over this little wall, you can see there are a few houses, a few properties. Now, I've no idea what exactly that building is you can see in shot there, but out there somewhere was Grendon Hall, and here's a little bit about that.
Grendon Hall began as a Tudor-style house built in the 1500s on top of an older Norman site. It later became the grand home of the Chetwynd family, who ran a huge estate that stretched for miles. Big names visited it, including the Prince of Wales, but the hall eventually slipped into a bad state. By the early 1930s, the building was in real trouble. In 1933, workmen arrived to start pulling it down, but it wasn't smashed to bits. Instead, the hall was taken apart piece by piece because it was to be transported to America and rebuilt there. Every stone needed numbering. In 1938, the estate changed again when Frank Haynes and his family moved into the former servants' quarters, which were still standing. The new owner, Mr. Hannibal, ran the British Industries Fair and needed someone to manage the grounds. Frank Haynes took on everything. In later years, Frank Haynes moved into the lodge at the top of the drive and stayed there until his death in 1961. Even though the hall itself had gone, the estate still held a sense of past lives and old routines. His memories kept that world alive for anyone who wanted to hear them. Life during the war brought its own moments. The former ice house entrance became an air raid shelter, and it proved useful because one night during the war, a German bomber dropped a bomb which landed about a mile away, leaving a huge crater. Grendon sits beside the River Anker, and not far from the site of the hall, you could cross that river using a packhorse bridge. In fact, you still can because the bridge hasn't moved. It's just that these days, modern traffic uses a different bridge. The Anker here is worth a mention itself. It's the river that inspired the river floss in George Eliot's writing. The old packhorse bridge, though, is the star of the scene, now protected as a Grade 2 listed site. It's built of coursed ashlar and has 4 depressed pointed arches. No one knows the exact date of the bridge, but it may go back to the 1400s. The arches have no ribs, and only one pier keeps the V-shaped recesses on the parapet, as the others were changed during repairs. Even with all this age, the bridge still stands strong. That said, the bridge has needed some help over the years. In 1627, it had to be repaired, and by 1630, the parish was told to pay for the work. The repairs were not great, so more money had to be raised in 1633 to fix it again. Even so, it stayed in a fair condition. Today, the bridge is for walkers only. It sits beside the church, a ways away from the main road. You can stand on it and look down at the water sliding underneath. Horses, carts and traders used it long ago, but now it feels like a place where time stands still.
Now, something we're going to see a lot of this week are canals. There's one here in Grendon.
This is the Coventry Canal, which passes through Grendon at a place called Baddesley Green. You're looking at Baddesley Green Wharf, which has been busy since the Industrial Revolution. Boats once stopped here to load and unload all sorts of goods. A solid red brick warehouse from the 1800s still stands. It's not in operation now, but when it was, this place would have been noisy, busy and full of workers. Now it's calmer, with the wharf mainly for boaters who need water, waste points and a safe place to stop. Baddesley Green grew around the canal, the bridge and that old warehouse. Today, it still feels active, with boats passing through and crews using the services. Of course, like many canals up and down the nation, this one began with James Brindley in 1768. He pushed for strong building standards, but the company ran out of money when the canal reached Atherstone. Brindley was replaced by Thomas Yeoman, and later Thomas Dadford and Thomas Sheasby stepped in. Bit by bit, the route linked up with other canals. Baddesley Green Bridge, which is also known as Bridge 48, sits right beside the wharf. It carries Spon Lane over the canal and frames a great view southeast towards Atherstone. In the past, it was packed with traffic moving coal and raw materials.
Baddesley Green has a few other bits, like this nursery school. It's an independent little place that looks after young children and helps them take their first steps into school life. It stands at the northeastern end of the old Grendon First School site, which once served the whole village. Just down the road from that school is Grendon Mill, a former watermill that stood on the Anchor. Whilst it would have been great to get a look at that, we unfortunately can't. No matter though, because Grendon Village has plenty awaiting us. Right, we've made it into Grendon Village now. It's time for a walk around. Now, as I said at the top of this video, this is actually going to be 2 episodes glued into one walk. So when we get to the end of this walk, it'll just continue on into the next one. It just makes more sense than anything else, because these 2 villages are proper glued together, as you will see. Let's deal with Grendon first, though. We're on a street called Little Brum here. Little Brum, obviously a reference to Birmingham. We're not a million miles away from Birmingham. And so our first job is to get off this street and head downhill towards the A5. We've got a few things to pass in between here and there. The first thing is a shop. So we begin this main walk now with a shop on the pretty steep Boot Hill. We'll discover how this road gets its name in a short while. We're heading downhill to start with, and next on our list is the Banana Moon Day Nursery on the corner of Little Brum. Banana Moon is part of a big childcare network that's spread across the UK. The place looks after young children in a simple, friendly setting. Banana Moon as a brand began in 2006 when one of the directors struggled to find a nursery that met their high standards. Instead of settling for second best, they decided to start their own. It began as a small idea but soon grew into something much bigger. The name Banana Moon came from a chat around a kitchen table where the director's mother was straining potatoes and suddenly suggested it. Fun, bright and easy for kids to say, the name became the face of the whole network. Banana Moon was founded in Warwickshire, and even as the network spread, the head office stayed in Warwick, where it still runs from today. Right, so we've sort of walked to the bottom of the hill now. It's not the steepest hill in the world, but I will have to climb back up that later when I do the other village, which is glued to this one. So sort of at the foot of the hill, you've got this building here. This is the Grendon Community Centre, and we'll be talking about this next, and the playing field, which is behind it somewhere. And then we'll continue on after this, right to the end of the road, where there's a roundabout. As Boot Hill flattens out, we get to the Grendon Community Centre, which has been here for a number of years. In June 2012, it became a proper company and a registered charity, which helped it run in a more organised way. This was built to serve the local coal mining community. You see, this bit of Grendon was initially called New Grendon, and it arrived in the 1950s. The village grew quickly to house workers from the local pits. Streets filled up, families moved in, and the need for this proper centre was growing. Ever since, this has been used by kids, teens, older residents and a plethora of other people with different needs. Even the County Council and the Environment Agency have met here in its time, the latter leading to the creation of the Grendon Flood Action Group. The Boot Hill Recreation Ground is next to that hall. This is the main outdoor play and sports space in Grendon. This field is a modern addition. From the 1950s to the 1980s, the council took on the land and turned it into a proper green space for the village. In the 2010s, the site was officially protected as an open space. That meant it could not be built on and would stay available for outdoor play. It became part of the North Warwickshire Green Space strategy, which helped keep places like this safe for future use. In 2021, Grendon Football Club signed a proper tenancy agreement with the council. This allowed the club to use and look after the main pitches. Between 2023 and 2024, the council carried out a big upgrade. New drainage was added to help both junior and senior pitches stay usable in bad weather. Grendon's Methodist Chapel next. This was built in 1885 by the United Methodist Free Church. It served farmers and miners who wanted a different place of worship from the Church of England. At the time, this part of Boot Hill only had a few terraced houses nearby. During construction, villagers could buy inscribed bricks to help pay for the building. It was a hands-on way for people to support the chapel and feel part of it. In 1983, the chapel was expanded with a full-width porch added across the front. It was the biggest change to the building since it first opened. But open this is no longer. Now closed, the final service was held in October 2016, bringing more than a century of worship on the site to an end. Okay, so we've reached the A5, which is by far the noisiest part of Grendon because this is a major road. Loads of traffic comes through here every single day. Now we'll deal with the A5 a bit more in a moment because, as you can see, there's the roundabout which I was talking about. There's something on that roundabout which has been a very contentious issue for the people of Grendon of late. Before we get to that though, we have to deal with this. This here is an old pub. It was called the Boot Inn.
So now we get to the reason why Boot Hill is so named. This building is the former Boot Inn. It was a pub that stood on Watling Street and served the locals for more than a century, but the building dates back more than 100 years. This has had a bit of fame in its time. It even appeared in a 1958 British Pathé film because of its quirky collection of ornamental boots. People remembered it for that, even long after the film was made. Over time, trade began to fall, and so now this is no longer a pub. In March 2017, the decision was made to close it for good. After closure, the building was redeveloped and turned into a collection of other things. One of them is Katie Lou's hair and beauty salon, but around the back of this main frontage, the rest of the building is something else. It's now a Central England co-op store, which recently opened with a full range of services, including self-scan tills, a bike repair station, water refill points, phone charging, a baby change toilet and a proper car park. It also had a food bank collection point to support edible links during the pandemic. The opening of this store created 12 new jobs, and of course, people make sure it's well used. The A5 plays a part in that. Even though the Boot Inn has gone, the spot is still busy and useful. The co-op has taken over the role of serving locals, just in a different way.
Now, it's not all that long ago there used to be two pubs here in Grendon. Obviously you know about the Boot, but there was another pub and it was on this roundabout. It's no longer there because, as you can see, there's a Costa there now. As well as the Boot, there was another pub in Grendon not far away from it. This Costa Coffee branch sits on what used to be the Black Swan, and not everyone was happy when it was redeveloped. The plan had been rejected at first, but an appeal overturned the decision. The pub had been closed for years, calling last orders in 2010 and later being used as short-term accommodation until 2012. Local councillors were not happy with the outcome, saying the new building was not in keeping with the village and highlighting concerns about traffic on the A5. The appeal result frustrated several local voices, including the chairman of Grendon Parish Council. Nonetheless, Costa now has a site that's 167 square metres in size, with a drive-through lane around it and access from Penmire Close. The layout features 19 parking spaces and 2 disabled bays. Here's something else that's disappeared from Grendon. These houses sit on the site of the former Sparrowdale School. It was a special school designed to cater for 4 to 16-year-olds who needed extra support with learning. It focused on moderate learning difficulties mainly. The school officially closed in 2006 after plans were made to merge it with Blythe School in Coleshill. Both schools supported pupils with complex needs, and the idea was to bring everyone together onto one site. Not everyone agreed with the plan, but the decision went ahead. The Sparrowdale site was left empty after closure. Nothing happened quickly, but the site was no longer used for education once the school shut its doors. It stayed in public ownership and was later listed as suitable for future housing. As you can see, it's now been turned into that housing. On Spon Lane now, you're looking at the site of another lost building. This is where the former church hall once sat, used for local events, small gatherings and church-linked activities. People hired it for meetings, clubs and simple day-to-day things. It had a plain look with white walls and a simple layout inside, but over time the hall became harder to maintain. Eventually it was decommissioned and put up for sale. Once that happened, it was only a matter of time before developers stepped in with plans to turn the land into something new. We now have a small cul-de-sac known as Church Hall Gardens. These houses form a neat little row and usually sell in the £200,000 to £300,000 range. There's now no trace of the old hall left. The land has moved on, but people who knew the hall still remember it well. Okay, so at the end of the road, it's all open plan. You can get back onto the A5. You find the parish notice board at this point. Let's deal with this. It's one of those horrible boards that I can't really open, so that's probably just going to have to do at the bottom of it. Now, also here, there's a bus stop, and beyond that, there's a fish bar. Let's check that out. Grendon Fish Bar next, as we return to Watling Street. There's nothing fancy about this, it's a chippy, but what it does well. It serves classic fish and chips and quick takeaway food. It's simple, busy and straight to the point, which is exactly what you want from a chippy. One thing people talk about here is the portion size. The place is known for its mountain of chips to share, which is exactly what it sounds like. You usually get a big tray piled high, perfect for families or anyone who just wants loads of food. I can neither confirm nor deny that that would suit me. Grendon Working Men's Club nearby has been a busy social spot for years. The club has an L-shaped layout with different areas for different activities. One section is set aside for pool, darts and a full-size snooker table, which is a rare thing these days. Membership is cheap and straightforward. New members usually pay around a tenner and renewals cost even less. Drinks are cheap for members, which keeps the place popular. Non-members can still come in by using the intercom at the door or paying a small sign-in fee. Okay, now we need to make our way back towards the south, and to do that we have to walk through a wooded area using a footpath that will bring us out near Gayton's Bakery. The noisiness of the A5 will start to fade away now as we head deep into the Warwickshire countryside. The other end of this path will take us to Maypole Lane, which is named after the former Maypole Inn. That was a proper old village pub made with stone and brick that came from work done on St Nicholas's Church at Baddesley, Ensor. Without realising it, as you pass through these woods, you're actually climbing Boot Hill again. So if you are going to follow my route, because I know some people like to, be prepared that this trek through the woods is uphill. Okay, so when we reach the end of this path, we'll be in the last little bit of Grendon, close to the border with the next one over. There's one major thing I still want to put on the map here. It's a bakery. Okay, we found our way to the bakery. It's called Gayton's, and there it is.
So this is Gayton's, which has been part of Grendon life for more than 100 years. It began in 1919 when 3 brothers came home from the war and needed work. So they set up the bakery and got straight into making bread for local people. Their names were William, Thomas and Samuel Gayton. William had been a miner before the war, but a hearing problem meant he could not go back underground. Baking became his new path, and he threw himself into it. Their bread soon became part of daily life in the village. Today, the bakery is run by David Gayton, the grandson of William. He started helping out when he was 11 and just never stopped. For him, the bakery is not just a job. It's the thing he's always known, and he still enjoys every part of it. The bakery's past is written down in an old diary that later became a book. It talks about tough times, busy days, and even moments when the bakery helped during big events. One of the most surprising parts is how they baked bread for German prisoners of war during World War II. Even in recent years, the bakery has stepped up when things got tough. During the pandemic, they doubled their bread production to help feed the area. After more than 100 years, the ovens are still hot, the bread still sells fast, and the Gayton name is still on the door.
Lastly in Grendon, although this is not the end of the walk, we're at Woodside C of E Primary School, which teaches children from age 2 right up to age 11. It's part of the Birmingham Diocesan Multi-Academy Trust and has space for around 260 pupils. The school is led by head teacher Natasha Johnson. It has a friendly open feel to it, this one. It sits in a wooded corner, which gives it a calm setting for learning. Woodside promotes kindness, respect and care for others, and these values guide how pupils treat each other and their surroundings. The school site includes an immersive classroom and the Fruits for Future project, which teaches children about nature and growing food. The wooded setting adds to this, giving children room to explore and learn outdoors when the weather allows it. Right, so we have found our way to the border between Grendon and the next village over. Behind me there, you can see we've got a green and a mining wheel. We'll be talking about those tomorrow. So join me as this walk continues. Now, normally at this point, at the end of an episode, you get a drive out, wouldn't you? Well, I can't drive out here because I'm continuing on walking. So you're going to get a walk out instead. Grendon has taken us through a lot in a short space of time. We've gone from old manor estates to canal wharfs, through the history of coal pits and the busy A5. Every corner had something different waiting for us, whether it was a bridge from the 1400s or a more than 100-year-old family bakery. One minute you're beside the Coventry Canal at Bradley Green, the next you're on Boot Hill with nurseries, schools and the recreation ground all lined up. Then you hit Watling Street, where old pubs have turned into a co-op and a Costa, and where traffic never really stops. Grendon feels like a place that tells its past very well. You get wartime tales, the mining years, the new builds, the shops, the footpaths, and a steady run of daily life. It's a good place to wander, a good place to learn, and a good place to continue walking, as we will do tomorrow.
Old Grendon sits by the A5. The anchor runs by its border side. 3 miles away from Atherstone, where the Warwickshire fields divide. Let's talk about its foundations. Doomsday spoke of ploughs and men, 16 teams working field and fen, watermill turning for shillings due, meadows stretching where the green breaks through. How about that church? All Saints' 12th century stone, tower added later as the years have grown. 7 miners lost in the Baddesley blast, rest in the churchyard vast. It changed with coal mining, that's for sure. New Grendon grew when the miners came, built for Baxterley's coal and its flame. That mine closed late in '89, but the streets still hold their old design. And what's hiding in the woods? In the woods is a brick dome off Farm Lane, empty now but once fully contained, with winter ice packed tight with straw, lasting long through the summer thaw. Let's sum it all up. So Grendon stands with its past held near, old and new in the same frontier, by the anchor's curve where the days feel pure. Grendon's a lovely village, for sure.
Hello folks, welcome back to North Warwickshire for part 2 of the walk we began yesterday. Yesterday we walked ourselves around Grendon and we left off sort of in this area here. Well, today we're going to continue that walk, and behind me there you can see we've got a pub that's called the Red Lion Inn. That's going to kick us off in Baddesley Ensor. Baddesley Ensor, priest's clearing belonging to Thomas de Ensor. Okay folks, today we're picking up where we left off in Grendon by having a look at its conjoined twin, Baddesley-Ensor. This one feels small at first glance, but once you start walking around, you realise how much history is packed into every corner. The name of the parish takes you straight back to Saxon days. In the Domesday Book it appears as Baddesley, described as a priest's clearing in the forest. The Ensor part arrived later, in around 1300, thanks to Thomas de Ensor. Baddesley-Ensor grew from scattered woodland plots into a place shaped by coal, graft and stubborn survival. It stayed rural for centuries until deep mining took hold. The big turning point came in 1850 when Baddesley Colliery was sunk just over the border in Baxterley. From then on, the parish lived to the rhythm of the pit, and it wasn't all good. There was a disaster in 1882 which killed 23 rescuers, an event which left a mark that still sits heavy. The pit finally closed in 1989, but it left behind a village that still screams coal. There's a big winding wheel on the common for a start. It stands right across from the Red Lion and acts like a reminder you can't ignore. It marks the mining years, the danger, the noise and the men who went underground every day. St Nicholas's Church is the other thing that stands out. It was built in 1848 with a brooch spire and a Norman carving tucked inside. Church House on Church Row is also notable. It's an old pub which has a link to the church in a roundabout way. We won't see the old pit site today, that's for tomorrow. Instead, this episode will concentrate on the village and its day-to-day features now. I'm talking about things like the social club, the wildlife pond and the Baddesley fish bar. Most of the well-known figures here were miners, preachers or long-serving locals. Folklore here tends to grow out of real events rather than spooky tales. The Latimer pulpit is a good example. It's said Bishop Latimer preached from it while hiding nearby in the 1500s. It would eventually end up in the Methodist chapel and later St Nicholas's Church. There's an old railway viaduct in this one too, which has its own whispers, mostly from explorers who talk about holes in the decking and some almost catastrophic near misses. So that's Baddesley-Ensor in a nutshell. Saxon roots, doomsday notes, coal dust, sandstone arches, old chapels and a wheel on the common that keeps the past in view. Everything harks back to the miners, even though its coal days are long gone.
Amelia's features.
Hello everyone, I've only got 2 things to talk about today, and they are right at the end of this video. I'll be on the church and the viaduct. The rest of the walk is down to TVI himself.
So the little walk you just saw there was the same walk that you saw at the end of the episode yesterday. I've just reused the footage to take us up from where I signed off yesterday to the Red Lion Inn. Let's get cracking. So to begin this episode, we're starting where we left off yesterday. After exiting Grendon, we find ourselves on the common in Baddesley-Ensor. This here is the Red Lion, a proper old pub doing its own thing. This one isn't open very much, but importantly it is open. You can only get in here at the weekend, so you have to time your visit right. It keeps limited evening hours through the week too, which suits the regulars who like a pint after work. Right outside, across from the door, stands a big colliery wheel memorial, reminding everyone of the mining past of the village and the people who worked underground. The wheel remembers Baddesley Colliery, which ran until 1989. Education in Baddesley Ensor goes back a long way, and it all kicked off in 1647 when George Abbott left money to fund a free school for the village. It was only £4.10 a year, but back then that was enough to get things moving. Fast forward 100 years and the village had its own junior school, and it was located on Keys Hill. You can't see it today because it's now been demolished. It took in children aged 7 to 11 and it stayed that way until a big change in 2001. That September, the school closed as part of a local merger. The infant provider on nearby Maypole Lane in Grendon also joined the plan. Instead of running two separate sites, everything was brought together. The successor was Woodside Primary School, which we saw yesterday. Okay, so at the top of Keys Hill, there's no school now, but there are a few other bits and bobs of interest. First of all, in front of us there, you can see we have Baddesley Fish Bar. But this hasn't always been a fish and chip shop. At the top of Keys Hill these days, there's a chippy. Surprisingly, this shop holds a lot of memories for the locals. People remember it as a shop long before it ever fried a single chip. Some recall it as a greengrocer's shop called Thorns when they were kids. Names-wise, the Wilding family opened it as a chip shop in around 1978 or 1979, and the Crowley family ran it after that. There used to be a laundrette next door. The whole hill was a proper little run of shops back in the day. So when you look at Baddesley Fish Bar today, frying away at the top of the hill, you're really looking at a piece of history without even knowing it. It's changed hands, changed uses, and picked up memories along the way. No wonder people still talk about it. Religiously, Baddesley Ensor has had at least 4 different places of worship. Here's the first one. Closed in 1996, this Methodist chapel was formerly a Quaker meeting house. By 1837, that movement had declined locally in popularity and the Wesleyans took over. They rented the meeting house to use as their chapel and their Sunday school. At the turn of the 20th century, they purchased the chapel outright and built a new one, which was connected to the original building by an interconnecting door. Non-conformist chapels thrived here because of the colliery workers that used them, but over the years interest dwindled, and in 1996 this chapel was sold to a private buyer. When the Keys Hill Chapel closed, the remaining worshippers joined with the United Reformed Church. We'll see the site of another chapel shortly. Between the two, we have the village hall. This is the main spot where people head for sports, meetups and local groups. It's run by the parish council and feels busy most days. Inside, you'll find a sports hall with a hard tile floor that can take a lot of action. People use it for anything that needs space. There's also a kitchen, a meeting room and a library that links straight into the building. One of the most unusual things this one holds is walking netball, a game that brings in a real mix of ages. It's the kind of place where something is always happening, even if netball isn't your thing. People know they can find an activity here that suits them. This house here sits on the site of the former Congregationalist or Zion Chapel. It was founded by John Dagley, who came from nearby Hartshill. The first meetings were held in a cottage in the village before the chapel was built in 1847. There was a burial plot at the rear of this, but it became full in the 1920s, and from then on, burials had to be in St Nicholas's churchyard. This later became the United Reformed Church, which in 1996 merged with the Methodists to become Trinity Church. That setup lasted until 2009, and due to a decline in membership, it was the end of an era. Nowadays, the chapel is gone, replaced with this modern dwelling, but the date stone from the chapel still exists. It's set into the wall outside. Baddesley Ensor Health Centre next, which acts as the main place for local medical help. It's a modern NHS building with the usual mix of doctors, nurses and day-to-day care. People head here for checkups, prescriptions, jabs and small procedures. After coming down a hill, we find ourselves at the site of an old post office. There are no visual clues here that give away that this used to be where it was, except one, a postbox in this wall. Baddesley still has a post office, and we're heading for that now. There's actually another big clue that that's where the post office was. That street you can see behind me there is called Post Office Road, but the post office isn't there anymore. I do know where it is though now. If you carry on down this road here and take a right turn, you pass a shop which contains it. Baddesley Ensor Post Office has been part of village life since 1852, which is a long run for any small branch. These days it sits inside this Premier shop on New Street, so you can grab a loaf of bread and post a parcel in the same trip. It's been here since 2014. On the same street we have the Baddesley Ensor Social Club. This was started 99 years ago, built by the community, and is still for the community to use, or indeed lose. Membership is only £5. Inside, the main bar is big and airy with plenty of space to sit down and relax. There's a separate games area too, packed with pool, darts and a full-size snooker table. The club also has a function room that people hire for birthdays and the like. Now we've made our way to the Speedwell Lane Recreation Ground, which is the main outdoor space in Baddesley Ensor. The ground has 2 full-size football pitches that stay busy through the season. Matches, training sessions and kickabouts all happen here. Got to admit, Baddesley Ensor does well for itself sports-wise, doesn't it? That's what you want in the summer, a massive, great big recreation ground like this. And this village sure has one. And just a few steps away from that playing field, we have the allotments. You know full well I had to get these in, right? If you're a new viewer, then you may not know finding these is a running gag. I hope the fans appreciate my work today. This is Church House on Church Row. It's one of the most recognisable buildings in Baddesley Ensor. It began life as an inn in the late 1700s or early 1800s and still carries that old look today. Church House was listed Grade 2 in 1988. It has sandstone walls, a tiled roof and tall brick stacks which make it stand out straight away. Even the door with its little hood on brackets feels like something from another time. The building has an L shape with a lower wing stretching back towards New Street. As we know, the village once had several pubs, a number which included the Red Lion, the Maypole and the White Horse, but most closed in the late 20th century. I don't know when this one closed, but now only the Red Lion and the Social Club continue the social side of village life. Okay, so we're about to come to the church, and finally this will give Amelia something to do, because for the majority of this episode there's not really been much for her to talk about, has there?
Thanks, Andy. I was beginning to feel a little left out today. This is St. Nicholas's Church, which was built fresh in 1848 after an older medieval chapel became too small and too far from the growing village to use. This, the new site, was chosen near the top of the hill on purpose. The design was down to an architect called Henry Clatton. The Bishop of Worcester dedicated the new church in 1846, marking the start of its long run as the village's main place of worship. So, where was the older church? Well, it was about half a mile to the northwest of this, close to what is now a massive industrial estate. The old church had stood since at least the 12th century and sat on what was called the Low Common. It had a Norman doorway with chevron moulding and a simple two-cell layout. A drawing from the Aylesford collection shows how small it was, with a single bell in the tower and a porch on the northern side. By Victorian times, it was isolated, overgrown and falling apart. When the new church was built, nothing from the old building was wasted. The Norman archway was bought by Abraham Bracebridge and placed at the rear entrance of Atherstone Church, where it still stands today. The font went to Attleborough for a few years. Bricks and masonry were taken into the village and used to build Church House, hence the name of that. Inside this new church, a piece of Norman zigzag carving survives, reset against the south side of the tower. Speaking of the tower, it's broad and topped with a brooch spire, and the top stage has a 3-bay arcade with louved openings. It is a simple but impressive layout that stands strong. The church has seen plenty of village life. A special exhibition in 1996 marked its 150th anniversary and filled the building with photographs, choir pictures, wedding shots, and memories from residents. Displays also covered the 1882 mining disaster, a powerful reminder of the past. One of the most unusual items linked to the church is the Latimer pulpit. It once stood in the Methodist chapel on Keys Hill and was believed to have been used by Bishop Latimer while hiding nearby in the 1500s. When the Methodist congregation merged with the Congregationalists in 1996, the pulpit was returned to St. Nicholas's just in time for the anniversary celebrations. It now sits as one of the church's most treasured pieces.
You can walk all the way through the churchyard there. If you come through the churchyard to the other side, you're faced with this crop field, which looks like you've just wandered into the middle of nowhere, but there is actually a footpath that skirts the edge of this, and it takes us back to the main road, which we saw before we went into the church. And then from there, it's just a simple case of crossing the border back into Grendon and back onto Little Brum, where I started this walk in yesterday's episode. Nice pair of villages those, aren't they? Of course, we haven't seen the coal mine that all these houses were built for. You will see that tomorrow.
To finish with, here's a piece on the Baddesley Ensor Viaduct, which sits out by Watery Lane, hidden under trees and brambles, and feels like something left behind from another age. It once carried trains loaded with coal from the Baddesley colliery. There's no railway line out there now, but you can still walk under it on a public path. The viaduct was built in the 19th century when coal ruled everything around the village. Trains rattled over the arches for decades. The viaduct was simply one piece of a much bigger machine. The pit finally closed in 1989, but by then the viaduct had already slipped into silence. No trains, no wagons, no noise, just an old brick and sandstone structure slowly being swallowed by plants. The top of the viaduct is in bad shape now. The wooden decking has rotted away, and there are holes hidden under the growth. Explorers who climb up there talk about gaps you could fall straight through. It is not a place to wander without care. From below, though, it still looks impressive, even with the plants taking over. Because of the sandstone and the way the faces have weathered, the viaduct has become a bit of a spot for local climbers. People sometimes, but thankfully not too often, use the exposed sides for bouldering. It's not an official climbing site, but people still head there for a bit of a challenge.
Baddesley Ensor has taken us through a lot in a short stretch. This one appears steady on the surface, but it's full of stories underneath. One minute you're beside the wildlife pond on the common, the next you're looking at the wheel that remembers the men lost in 1882. Then you hit Keys Hill, where the old school once stood, the fish bar still fries away, and the chapel sites sit between the houses. Even the quieter spots like the allotments, the wreck and the old inn on Church Row carry their own little echoes of what life was like before now. And now, stepping back from it all, Baddesley Ensor feels almost a shell of its former self. Coal ruled the roost here, and as we know, communities thrived where men went underground. Tomorrow, we'll see where they went as we head for the site of the pit.
Baddesley sits by the edge of a hill 3 miles west of Atherstone, a place where a pit once carried the day and work underground got done. Men headed out as the daylight broke from shafts sunk deep in clay, and although that pit is gone for good, the tale of their graft still stays. Hey, hey. A sign of the work once now long gone. Baddesley, you look out far and wide across Birmingham's globe and beyond. The worst of the days came hard and fast, a fire that turned the air. 23 men stepped in for the traps, their courage laid out there. Now the wheel stands firm on the common ground, a mark of the lives once spent. And the pit's old site holds rows of cars, 9,000 strong in its tent. Hey, hey, oh, Baddesley, with a wheel on the green, a sign of the work once now long gone. Baddesley, you look out far and wide across Birmingham's globe and beyond. Keys Hill keeps its fish bar warm, the barber trims through the day. The library opens its doors for books and screens if you need that way. Buses roll on the 748, the 761 more, and Atherstone's trains sit close at hand, airport's not far from your door. Hey, hey, oh, Baddesley, with a wheel on the green, a sign of the work once now long gone. Baddesley, Baddesley, you look out far and wide, across Birmingham's globe and beyond. So here you stand, with a common white, and a wheel that reminds you so. Oh, Baddesley, you carry old and new, and I never want to let go. Hey, hey, oh, Baddesley, Baddesley, with a wheel on the green, a sign of the work once now long gone. Baddesley, Baddesley, you look out far and wide, across Birmingham's globe and beyond.
Welcome back to North Warwickshire again, folks, and to a village which has a lot of links to the two you've already seen in this run this week. This is a place that used to have the site of the colliery that we've been talking about so far in this run. It also has a church, but this church, you can see behind me here, is a long way out of the village. It's a good mile, if not a mile and a half away from the actual centre of this place. There's a reason for that, and we will discuss why. Anyway, let's see it. This is Baxterley. Baxterley, Baker's Clearing. Next up in North Warwickshire, about 2 miles away from Atherstone, is Baxterley. This is a linear village which started out some 1.7 miles away from where it is now. It moved eastwards thanks to the pull of coal mining. The name Baxterley comes from the Old English Backer and Lee, meaning Baker's Clearing. What makes it interesting is that despite existing back then, it never appeared in the Domesday Book. That odd omission has puzzled local historians for years. Baxterley began as a Saxon settlement, grew around its medieval church, and later shifted eastwards when the Baddesley and Baxterley colliery opened in 1850. The pit pulled workers, houses and daily life away from the old village centre, creating the layout we see today. After the mine closed in 1989, the area changed again. The Baddesley colliery site, though, remains industrial, with Jaguar Land Rover running its national distribution centre on the grounds, keeping the site busy long after the coal stopped coming up. Baxterley has several other landmarks that stand out. The Grade 2 listed parish church still carries its Norman and medieval features, while the Winding Wheel memorials near the pond honour the miners who worked and died at the pit. Then there's the house underground, a curious structure which hides in the trees as a strange relic of Old Hall Farm. And as if that wasn't enough, an old windmill site on Windmill Lane is now remembered through a replica on the village green. One of the most notable figures linked to Baxterley was Hugh Latimer, the Bishop of Oxford, who preached at Baxterley Church on Christmas Day in 1552. His niece lived nearby in Mansetta, giving him ties to the area. The colliery's history highlights figures like William Dugdale, the owner who died in the 1882 disaster, and rescuers Reuben Smallman and Charles Day, who were awarded bravery medals for their actions underground. For more than a century, the main employer was the colliery, but today the biggest employer linked to the parish is JLR. The shift from coal to car parts marks one of the biggest changes in Baxterley's working life to this point. That said, the village has adapted, and as we walk through this one you'll see exactly how each era seems to have left something behind. Whether you start at the church, the pond, or the old colliery site, you can trace the village's journey right across the last 1,000 years.
Okay, everybody, today we're finally going to see the site of Baddesley Colliery, which is actually in Baxterley. I'll also be telling you about the church, which has no dedication, and the windmill this used to have. In the 2 episodes we've seen already this week, we've mentioned coal mining, but so far we haven't seen the site of any mines. Here in Baxterley, we're about to. Despite being within Baxterley, this industrial area here was the site of Baddesley Colliery. It began in 1850 when the Dugdale family opened new shafts on Baxterley Common, land they had bought a couple of years earlier. Coal had been dug nearby long before, but this was a fresh start with bigger plans. Mrs. Harriet Dugdale kicked things off by turning the first sod. 2 shafts were sunk, and the place soon became a busy workplace. In the 1870s, the first seams were running out, and the pit needed to reach deeper ground. Water kept flooding the new area, and nothing seemed to fix it until a mining engineer called Mr. Gillett came along. He had a plan for a boiler and pump system. The boiler was fitted, but the brick arch he wanted around it was never built. That choice would come back to haunt the pit in a terrible way. In 1882, a fire broke out underground when the coal above the boiler began to glow red. 9 men were trapped, and rescuers rushed in to help. A huge explosion followed, filling the workings with gas and smoke. 32 men died, including the owner, William Dugdale, who had gone down himself to help. It was the darkest day the pit ever faced. Even after the disaster, the pit carried on. A 3rd shaft was sunk in 1897, simply because demand for coal kept rising. For its first 100 years, the pit worked the 2-yard seam, but after nationalisation in 1947, things changed. Machines arrived and new seams were opened. Now, far more modern, the pit gained a new coal preparation plant, opened in 1962, and later a new lamp room and a computer-run belt control room. It felt like the pit was trying to keep up with the times, but the deeper the pit went, the harder the job became for the men working there. In the late 1980s, the ground began to cause trouble again. Geological problems slowed everything down, and the pit started losing huge amounts of money every week. So, in 1989, the pit finally closed, ending almost 140 years of work. 650 jobs disappeared overnight. The site of the colliery, though, is still industrial. It lay empty and abandoned for a while before Jaguar Land Rover came along. They now run its national distribution centre on the old Baddesley Colliery, handling car parts instead of coal now. Warwickshire has become JLR's base all around. Its main engineering and design work takes place not far away at the Gaydon Centre, which is on an old World War II bomber base. The company itself has a long background. Jaguar began in 1922 as the Swallow Sidecar Company, while Land Rover launched its first model in 1948. Since 2008, both brands have been owned by Tata Motors, and they now operate under the modern luxury banner. This Baxterley site plays a key part in keeping their vehicles on the road.
Okay, so we've driven through Baxterley there from the site of the colliery, and we've ended up at the church. Now, as I said in the intro here, this church is a long way away from the village itself. It's a good mile, if not a mile and a half, down the road. Well, there it is. It's a beautiful church, to be honest with you, and it's kind of on its own out here. There is an old school room as well, which we'll catch on the way out of this. Let's talk about this first though.
Long before the pit, Baxterley was already a village, but it wasn't located near the common. Instead, it was way over to the west, and it was pulled eastwards by the development of the pit. There are a few clues left in the west as to its previous location, and this church is the best one. This is a Grade 2 listed church with a long, unusual past. Simply known as Baxterley Church because it has no known patron saint, it began as a small Norman building with a simple plan and tiny chancel windows. Over time, it grew bit by bit, picking up new parts as the village around it changed. The earliest parts of the church were built in around 1200, and later work kept adding to it through the 13th and 14th centuries. The tower came in 2 stages, with the base built in around 1540 and the top added in the early 1600s. A famous moment here came on Christmas Day, 1552, when Hugh Latimer, the Bishop of Oxford, preached here during the Reformation years. His niece lived nearby in Mansetta, so he knew the area well. In 1958, workers made a surprising find during some repairs. A 13th century wooden crozier head was discovered hidden inside the chancel arch wall. It turned out to be the oldest piece of church equipment in Warwickshire. No one knows why it was placed there, but it sat untouched for hundreds of years until the renovation team uncovered it. The church was heavily rebuilt in 1875 by the architects Paul and Bickerdike, who added a north aisle and porch and repaired worn-out parts of the structure. Even with the upgrades, the church kept its small, stone-built look, with a nave, chancel and tower still forming the main layout. Given the movement of the village away from here, this church today sits about 1.7 miles from Baxterley village and slightly closer to Wood End, which became the nearest settlement after 1890. It shares its priest with Kingsbury, Merevale, Hurley and Wood End.
Okay, so here's the old schoolroom, which is right next to the church, as I mentioned. There's a plaque up there, a stone. It says, "Feed my lambs, St. John 21, chapter 21, verse 15, FM Hector 1889, I think that says. So I think that's what that stone says. Okay, so from here we will go back towards Baxterley. Before we reach the village though, there's a landmark which is kind of, it's there, but you shouldn't really know it's there, if you know what I mean. But a lot of people have done a lot of cheeky trespassing to get to it over the years. If you drive between the sites of the old and new Baxterley villages, you'll be forgiven for thinking it's all countryside. It is, mainly. However, there's a patch of trees to the north of this road that hide a secret, which everyone around here seems to know. Locals call it the house underground, but it was never a real house at all. It sits in those trees under a mound of earth. The place looks mysterious, with brick archways and dark chambers that feel like they belong in an adventure film. It's been abandoned for years. Because it's on private land, we can't get to it. However, loads of people have trespassed over this field to reach it, and I know that because there's an endless amount of photos of it online. I don't recommend doing it, but if you do, it's quite the fascinating building. The structure is thought to date from the early 1900s, built from brick and sandstone. It was part of Old Hall Farm, which once stood nearby. Farmers needed cool, dry spaces to store things, so underground rooms like this were handy. One chamber was almost certainly used as an ice house. The second chamber was likely used as a smokehouse or a larder. Meat could be smoked, dried or stored in cooler air away from sunlight. Some locals think it may have also been used for lime burning or linked to old sandstone workings. Inside, the place is in a rough shape now. Graffiti covers the walls, rubbish has been dumped, and the brickwork is slowly falling apart. Even so, it still feels like a strange little time capsule from a forgotten farm. Right, here we are then in Baxterley village, and this won't take us very long. It's a nice simple walk, this, from one end of it to the other, and then we'll just walk straight back again. There's a few nice features here. There's a bowls club, there's a pub, there's a pond, there's a memorial for the colliery, and there's also a replica windmill on the village green. That sounds interesting, doesn't it? In the main village now, we have a few landmarks to cover related to the colliery, and here's the first one, Baddesley Colliery Bowls Club. This began in 1920 and it's open every day, which makes it easy for anyone to turn up and just have a go. Social sessions run on Tuesday mornings and Friday afternoons, which are great for newcomers because the atmosphere is easygoing and supportive. One lovely thing about the club is how it looks after the area around the village green, which we're about to come to. Next is the pub, and it apparently, at this time of year, plays music out loud. Can you hear? It's David Gray's Babylon, that is.
This is Baxterley's only pub. It's called the Rose Inn and prides itself on the fact it has long views towards Leicestershire and Birmingham. It's open 7 days a week and sits right beside the village green and the duck pond, which makes the setting feel a bit special. The building goes back to the 18th century and did all sorts of jobs before it ever became a pub. It was once a gentleman's residence, then a courthouse, then a jail, and even a mortuary at one point. It's been a public house for more than 100 years. Food is a big part of what the pub does now. Everything is made on site, with nothing bought in, and the team uses local and international ingredients to keep the menu fresh and interesting. The pub also serves cask-mark beers. The pub also has a function room too that can seat up to 60 people for weddings, parties, meetings, or anything else that needs a bit of room. And it works well because it sits right beside an orchard and the pond, which gives people space to wander outside. Outside, the pub has a relaxing area overlooking both, which makes it a lovely spot on warm days. With a big on-site car park and easy access from the main road, you can see why the Rose Inn is the jewel in Baxterley's crown.
I have to admit, this is one of the most beautiful village greens I think I've ever seen in front of the pub. You saw a little glimpse of it there. I took some really good photos of it, which you'll see in the song at the end of this video. That's probably better than me getting it with this camera, to be honest with you. But of course the pond is the standout feature. That's right in front of the pub. Next door to the pond though, there's also this, because let's not forget, this was a mining community, and there's a memorial. Near the pond we have some winding wheel memorials which remember everyone who worked in the pits, but especially those who were lost in the 1882 disaster. Two of the rescuers, by the way, Reuben Smallman and Charles Day, were later awarded bravery medals for their actions. These old wheels help people understand how dangerous the work was and how tough life could be. They stand as a thank you to the men who kept the pit running for so long, and being next to the pond, it's an ideal spot for a bit of quiet reflection. The pond is looked after with help from the Warwickshire Wildlife Trust, who keep an eye on the water and the birds here. They make sure the pond stays healthy so that ducks, moorhens and other creatures that use it can thrive. So if you walk past the pub, you've then got this long row of, I assume what are houses these days. I imagine they didn't start as houses. Does anybody know what these were? Yeah, if you do know what these started life as, I would be intrigued to know, because I don't think they were residences from the beginning. Probably something to do with the colliery, because this is right next to the site. The site of the colliery is just behind these. Anyway, if you walk past them, you're then on to what is the main village green. We've seen a little part of it at the pub there, but the main expanse of the green here in Baxterley is here. Now on this, there's a replica windmill somewhere. Let's see if we can find it.
Lastly, we have to talk about a different sort of industry that Baxterley once knew. It used to have a windmill. It was a classic wooden post mill built in 1793, marked with the initials JB on its frame. It stood on what is now Windmill Lane, working through the 1800s before falling out of use in the late 1880s. It was a simple open trestle mill with 4 common sails, a ladder and a tail pole. For years it stood as a bare timber skeleton on the hill. By the time the 20th century arrived, the mill was in a bad way. Steam-powered milling had taken over, and the old wooden mill was left to weather the elements. It still stood, but only just, with its frame exposed and its machinery slowly disappearing. Some parts were taken away, and some were later burned for firewood. The end came suddenly in 1946, when a storm finally brought the weakened structure down. The mill collapsed while people were discussing plans to move and restore it, which made the loss even more frustrating. The huge central post somehow survived the crash and stayed intact. That surviving post turned out to be incredibly important. It was rescued and later used in the reconstruction of the Dansey Green Mill at the Avencroft Museum, where it still stands today. Without the Baxterley post, that restored mill would not exist in its current form. In the village, people wanted something to remember the old mill by. A replica was suggested, and ideas ranged from tiny models to a full-size rebuild. The debate ended when a man named John Stevens announced he'd already built one. The original plan was to place it at the junction of Windmill Lane and Main Road, but that had to change due to sewer works, so it was put on the village green instead. The site on Windmill Lane is quiet now, but the history is still remembered via the road name.
Okay, so that's Baxterley. There's not much more to it than that. All I've got to do now is walk my way back to where I parked in the street called the Orchard, which is at the other end. There's no way to make a loop in this village. It's just a simple case of walking up and down, but it's not too far. So anyway, been a nice village, that one, hasn't it? I wonder what song's playing at the pub when we go past it. Shall we see? And as it turns out, I don't know whether you can hear it in the background, that is Corinne Bailey Ray's Put Your Records On. It's a good tune, that. And oh yeah, there is one more thing just before we go back to the car. There's a playing field in Baxterley, and if you walk back towards the car like I'm doing now, you'll pass it. The entrance is up there, and then if you come into it, you've got this big expanse of playing field there. You've got a couple of football goals there, and you've got this little pond here as well. It's quite nice, that, isn't it? Baxterley is a place that's moved, adapted and rebuilt itself more than once. We've seen how a Saxon clearing became a medieval church site, only for the whole village to pull east when the colliery arrived in 1850. Our time here has taken us from the far past to the industrial age and back into the present. We've stood at the colliery memorials, thought about the 1882 disaster and seen how the pit shaped the village for more than 100 years. We've even talked about the strange house underground. The old colliery grounds now power Jaguar Land Rover's distribution work. The pond is cared for by the Wildlife Trust, and the Rose Inn still looks out over the green just as it has for generations. It's a small place this, but it leaves a big impression that's long lasting.
So here's a story about a small village where the numbers climb year on year. Jaguar Land Rover keeps the centre here, and the workforce keeps things clear. There's Saxon roots in yonder church, though the hole's long gone from view. And there's cottages by the fields out there where the past still filters through. This is Baxterley, where a mine once called, where the wheel by the pond stands tall. This is Baxterley, where local tales are strong. waits for them all. It's mining day, so accidents. A blast shook the ground 1 year. 32 were lost in dust and smoke, but the church keeps their names near. The pit shut down in 89. Bad times for the men and their wives, and the village is about the main road now. It's a calmer daily life. This is Baxterley, where a mine once called, where the wheel by the pond stands tall. This is Baxterley, where local tales are strong, and the rose inn waits for them all. No school stands here, but the neighbours help with the nearest ones in town. Atherstone teaches the older kids, it's where the secondary place is found. Buses run on the 777, and the A5 sits close by, and the grass-strip field on the western edge sends small craft through the sky. So here's this place with its roots held firm, where the past and present stay, where the wheel, the inn, and the old mine's mark keep guiding Baxterley's way. Baxterley's way. For them all.
Hello folks, welcome back to North Warwickshire for another episode. Now, I've got a really small one for you today. This one shouldn't take us too long to get around, but there is going to be a bit of a difficult footpath to walk on over some earthworks, so we'll see how we go. So you can see behind me there, we've got a pub. That's called the Horse and Jockey, and behind the camera the other way, there's what remains of a churchyard. There used to be a church here, not any longer. All you've got is the remains of its surroundings, its churchyard. You can find both of these in Bentley. Bentley, Bent Grass Clearing. Bentley is next in North Warwickshire. This is a small hamlet a few miles southwest of Atherstone, not far from Baxterley, which is famous for very little. In fact, barring a pub, a pinfold and the site of a former church, this hasn't got a lot. The name Bentley comes from Old English, meaning bent grass and woodland clearing, which fits the look of the place. Even today, the mix of open fields and wooded corners out here makes the old meaning feel spot on. Bentley's past stretches from early farming through medieval life and into the present day. Ridge and furrow marks still sit in the fields as reminders of long-gone strip farming. The manor was settled by John de Wilmcote on his daughter Joan before July 1315. Later came the Hacketts, the mining era, a small school, and a slow move into a quieter, modern hamlet. Bentley's best feature is the moated site, a rectangular earthwork with an island in the middle and a ditch that once reached impressive widths. The Horse and Jockey pub began life in 1824 as the Hanging Gate and still pulls in people today. The restored Bentley Pound sits near School Farm and carries the inscription BILT 1846. The old school once served farming and mining families. Bentley's tales tend to grow from its older sites rather than from its legends. No one knows exactly how the island of the moat was reached, for one. The Pound has its own tales about angry farmers, and the school has stories of kids posing as soldiers in early photos. Bentley's most memorable figure is Kath Taylor of the Horse and Jockey. Born at the pub in 1912, she ran it for decades and became its best-known face. Her family had held the licence since 1893, mixing pub work with farming and brewing. Bentley rarely hits the headlines, but small things matter here. The Pound restoration in the early 2000s brought volunteers together and saved a historic feature. The moated site remains under protection, with heritage groups keeping an eye on erosion and access. Bentley's working life has changed over time too. Farming shaped the early years, with families working the fields around School Farm and the manor. Mining later pulled children and adults into the Baddesley pits, with some pupils leaving school as young as 10 to earn money. Today, most people work in nearby towns, but farming still leaves its mark on the land. The pub, small businesses, and local trades keep things ticking over too. Let's head out to explore this one, and we won't be here very long.
Bentley might be a tiny place, but it has a lot more than you might think. There's an old church to discuss here, along with a moated site that's the best known feature of a place that's barely a hamlet.
Right, that should give you an idea of how small Bentley is, because I had to reuse the footage from the drive-in to use for the drive to the start point today, because there's just nothing to this basically. Well, I say nothing to this, there is obviously something to it, or else it wouldn't be a village. We'll talk about the Horse and Jockey pub in a moment. Our first job is to talk about what happened to this church, which is no longer here.
Bentley has no church these days, but it used to. Here we're at the site of what used to be St. John's Church. It was a small red brick place built in 1837, surrounded by a heavily wooded patch of North Warwickshire. It had a simple layout, with a nave, a chancel, and a west tower with battlements. Sitting about 200 yards northeast of Epps Farm, the church was put up to replace an old chapel of the Holy Trinity, which had fallen into total ruin long before. People in the area needed somewhere closer for services, so St. John's stepped in as the new local place of worship. But of course, we're in a small hamlet here, so fewer people came through the doors as the 20th century came around. It slowly slipped out of regular use, with the last recorded baptism taking place in 1967. After that, it was only used now and then, and even those visits faded away. With no regular use and no real need for upkeep, the building was eventually taken down. Nothing of the church can be seen today. The red brick walls, the tower, and the little interior have all gone. Only the graveyard remains, and that still gets occasional care to keep it tidy. Even though the church has disappeared, its records have not. Baptisms, marriages, and burials linked to St. John's are still kept safe by local genealogical groups. The Birmingham and Midland Society for Genealogy and Heraldry helps preserve these details for anyone tracing family links.
Okay, so next to the church site there's a bridleway, and dead opposite the end of that bridleway you've got the Horse and Jockey pub. So this is the next thing. You wouldn't expect a place as small as Bentley to have a pub as big as this, would you? Well, it does.
Bentley's only pub is the Horse and Jockey, which began life in 1824 as the Hanging Gate. It was a simple stop on the old road between Bentley, Coleshill and Atherstone. Local accounts link the name to a toll gate used by travellers passing through this part of Warwickshire. The modern Horse and Jockey name is a title with a sporting feel that seems to have stuck fast. Even when the name briefly changed to the Bentley, the old name returned because locals felt it belonged. Today, the Horse and Jockey mixes its past with a modern welcome. The building has grown and changed as such. It now includes a rustic barn-style restaurant with exposed brickwork and beams, plus a campsite with pitches, electric points and space for caravans. One of the strongest links to the past comes from Kath Taylor, who was born at the pub in 1912 and later became its long-running landlady. Her family had run the place since 1893, mixing pub work with farming and brewing.
Right, does Bentley have any houses? Is the question that's on my mind next. Well, the answer is yes, but they are sort of sporadically placed. There's no sort of discernible cluster of housing. There's no streets or cul-de-sacs or anything like that. Most of them are sort of dotted around along two roads. You've got this road here, which the pub's on, and then you've got another one off to the left, which goes up towards Baxterley, and there's a couple along that road as well. What we're going to do now is we're going to go and find the Pound, which is on the junction between the two roads. So you'll see for yourself there's not much in the way of housing here. There's more in the way of trees, to be honest with you. It's a very wooded place. If you just look here, you can see the junction up ahead that I was talking about, and it's surrounded by all these beautiful shady trees. The Bentley Pound is a small stone enclosure which was once used to hold stray animals until their owners paid a fine. We know how these things work by now, right? The inscription BILT 1846 sits on the stone, though the structure is thought to be older than that. Records from 1676 show there were repairs made to both a set of stocks and a pound here, proving how long the site has been in use. Later stone pounds were often built on top of earlier medieval ones, which fits with what locals believe about Bentley's structure. In the early 2000s, the Bentley Pound needed saving. Atherstone Civic Society stepped in and led a restoration project between 2001 and 2003, supported by funding from Wren under the Landfill Tax Credit Scheme. Just up the road we come to the old school, which sits close to the aptly named School Farm. This has long been closed, but when it was open it served kids from farming and mining families who paid just 1 penny a week thanks to support from William Dugdale, the lord of the manor. Life for those children was tough and school often came second to earning money. Records show pupils left here as young as 10 to work at the Baddesley collieries. Families needed every bit of income they could get, so school days were short and childhoods were unfortunately even shorter. There are some old photographs of this kept in the Atherstone Library from the early 1900s, which show village children posing outside the school dressed up as soldiers for the camera. I wonder, what was all that about? Right, now for the most awkward part of this video. Getting onto that footpath which will go over the earthworks. It was a bit of a swine trying to find it. I am on it. I'm just coming through some woods here which are laced with nettles on ground level, which I'm having to avoid as best I can with shorts on. It's not a good idea walking through nettles, is it? Anyway, these are about to come to an end, and in a moment, in front of you, you should be able to see these earthworks of a moated site, which Amelia will tell you all about.
Arguably, Bentley's best-known feature is in the fields, away from the roads. The Bentley moated site marks the spot where the medieval manor house once stood. It survives now as a rectangular earthwork with a ditch that was originally up to around 12 metres across. The moat was built to protect a high-status home. The site lies about 330 metres southwest of School Farm, exactly where the old manor is recorded on historic maps. The manor was settled by John de Wilmcote on his daughter Joan before July 1315. Joan and her husband Henry de Lisle held the land, and by the 14th century it had passed to the Hackett family, who were still linked to it in 1689. What remains of this manor house site now is quite interesting. It's a neat rectangle with an island in the middle. The western arm of the moat is now dry, and there is no sign of stone lining anywhere around the ditch. There is also no obvious entrance point to the island, which adds a bit of mystery to how people originally accessed it. South of the main moat sits a small square annex, surrounded by a shallow dry ditch that appears to be part of the same medieval layout. That may have been used for storage, animals, or small-scale work linked to the manor. Around the moat are vague traces of ridge and furrow.
That's it, we're at the end of the footpath. I don't know what I was worried about really, it wasn't the worst footpath in the world. I've been on worse, I know that much. There's some stiles involved though, so if you do want to follow this route, just beware they're stiles, not gates. I don't like stiles, especially not when I'm wearing tight shorts. I don't want to rip them, but a couple of times there I almost did. Right, so we're on this little lane. We'll turn left at these houses here, and the car is literally just over there, outside the Horse and Jockey. That's Bentley. We've covered a lot of ground in Bentley, and it's been a walk packed with tracks, fields and bits of history lining the edges. From the lost church site to the old school by School Farm, everything here feels close together, even though it's physically spread out. The Horse and Jockey brought in its own slice of local life, from its days as the hanging gate to the long run of Cath Taylor. The Pound gave us a look at how stray animals were once handled, and the school showed us how tough life was for kids heading off to the pits at the age of 10. Then the manor moat pulled us back further with its dry western arm, its annex to the south, and those faint traces of ridge and furrow around the edges. Each spot adds something to a walk around here. It's not as small as you might think.
Baddesley close and Baxterley around. Bentley, proud of its fab old pound. A village which keeps its tales alive. Old sites sit where the past can thrive. Moats and finds in the fields around, all held close in this Warwickshire ground. Baddesley close and Baxterley around. Bentley, proud of its fab old pound. School kids standing, old photos still. Elementary days on the old school hill. Bronze Age tools in the soil below. Flints and traces of long ago. Baddesley close and Baxterley around. Bentley, proud of its fab old pound. Gospel oak tall house down the track. Medieval plots that never came back. Manor moat with its worn down ring. Bentley holds every hidden thing. Baddesley close and Baxterley around. Bentley, proud of its fab old pound.
Hello folks, welcome back to North Warwickshire for the last one this week. Now behind me there you can see we have a church. It's one of the most unusual churches we have in this country, and it almost stands all on its own along one great big long lane that runs from Atherstone in one direction to Baddesley, Ensor-Baxterley in the other. We saw those two villages earlier this week, didn't we? Well, it's not just this church that puts this particular parish on the map. It definitely does, but there's more to it than that. This is the parish of Merevale. Merevale, Valley of the Pool. Okay, so lastly this week we're covering the parish of Merevale, which is tied to the Dugdales, the family who founded the former pits we've seen in the last few days. Merevale sits about 1.5 miles west of Atherstone and feels more like a long lane than a village. The name Merevale is usually taken to mean Valley of the Pool or Valley of the Lake, which makes sense when you realise there are the old monastic fish ponds still sitting in the fields near Abbey Farm. Merevale's recorded history begins in 1148 when Robert de Ferris founded a Cistercian abbey here. The monks built their church, fish ponds and farm buildings, and the place grew into a busy religious centre. Henry VIII later dissolved the abbey in 1538. The land then passed through several owners before the Stratford family bought it in 1649. The Dugdales took over in the 18th century and still run the estate today, and at the centre of it is the huge Victorian mansion Merevale Hall. Rebuilt in 1840 by Edward Blore, it stands on a hill with towers, cupolas and a massive square tower. It sits within 185 hectares of land and looks out across 3 counties. It's private, but even so it still sets the tone for the whole area. Merevale also has St Mary the Church of Our Lady, a rare Cistercian gate chapel that still holds weekly services. Abbey Farm sits on top of the old abbey grounds, with the freighter wall still standing 6 metres high. The monastic fish ponds survive too. Merevale as a village is quiet today, with no major developments or big public projects. The hall remains private, the church continues weekly services, and the estate manages its land, much as it has for years. Just outside the area is Baddesley Basin, once a busy coal point on the Coventry Canal. We'll cover that in this episode too, because even though it's technically in Grendon, it makes far more sense here. It's only a spit away from the entrance to Merevale Hall. The most famous visitor linked to Merevale was Henry VII, who stayed at the abbey on his way to Bosworth. The Dugdale family are of course also well known, especially for their work as antiquarians. Richard Geest, who later took the Dugdale name, tied Merevale to Blythe Hall. They were also the main employers. As we know, the Dugdale family owned several large coal mines across North Warwickshire and Bedworth. Modern employment is more limited, and barring estate work, I can't imagine anyone actually earns a living here. Let's see though, shall we?
Amelia's Features.
Merevale is where the Dugdale family lived, and in this episode I'll be showing you their massive mansion, which dominates the area. I'll also be on the church and the lock at Baddesley Basin. See you shortly.
Merevale is not a village, well, not in a traditional sense anyway. Essentially, what makes up Merevale is one lane that has a church, a farm and a few scattered houses. The rest of it is a massive estate belonging to Merevale Hall. Let's check out the church first. Okay, so in driving to our start point there, it looked like we were going sort of off-piste into some private property. Well, effectively we were, but you are allowed to drive into that because that's where the car park is for this church. You can park outside the church because, as you can see, there's a rather large lay-by, but there is some, like, I guess it's official parking at Abbey Farm. We're going to be seeing Abbey Farm in a moment, but first of all, let's deal with the church. Beautiful building, by the way.
This is St Mary, the Church of Our Lady, which is probably the best known publicly accessible landmark in the area. It began life in the 1200s as a chapel by the gate of a former Cistercian abbey. Visitors came here, and so did women who were not allowed inside the main abbey. It still opens its doors every week, which is pretty rare for a gatehouse chapel in Britain. The layout is unusual, and you notice that straight away. The nave comes from the late 1200s, and the chancel was rebuilt in around 1340, then stretched again in around 1500. The church is famous for its Jesse window, and people talk about that a lot. It's a bright, colourful piece of glass from the 1300s that shows the family line of Jesus. Kids love spotting the figures in the glass. Adults do too. It is one of those things you can stare at for ages without getting bored. Inside, you also find pieces rescued from the old abbey. There are choir stalls from the 1400s, old tiles under your feet, and a rood screen from the same period sitting at the west end. These bits were saved when the abbey was pulled apart in the 1500s. The gatehouse chapel survived because the locals still needed a place to worship. Because of that fact, this is the only Cistercian gate chapel in the whole country that still holds weekly services. That means this is an extremely rare feature.
So those of you that know my car will have seen there that I chose not to park in Abbey Farm to get the church here. What I did, I used it as a turnaround basically, just so I could turn around and park here outside the church. But now I need to go and actually see Abbey Farm. I'll stay on the road to do this. I'm not going to drive in again. Just going to drive down a few hundred yards or so, and we'll talk about that too, because that's important as well.
So what about the abbey? Well, it was named Merevale Abbey, and it began in 1148, when Robert, Earl Ferrers, handed over land he called all my Forest of Arden. Monks liked quiet spots, so they built their main abbey on that land and placed the chapel outside the gate for visitors. Everything changed when Henry VIII shut the abbey down. The monks left, the buildings were taken apart, and the land was handed to Sir Walter Devereux in 1540. After that, the estate passed through different owners until the Stratford family bought it in 1649. So, are there any ruins? Well, sort of. This is Abbey Farm, which sits right on top of the old grounds, and you can see bits of the abbey in its garden. The Frater, which was the dining hall, still has a tall north wall reaching about 6 metres high. The monks who once lived here were clever workers. They ran a huge cattle herd, built a watermill, and created a set of fish ponds that covered 17 acres. Those fish ponds also survive in the fields behind this very farm. People often talk about a royal link to the abbey. Henry VII is said to have stayed here before the Battle of Bosworth in 1485. The abbey would have been busy then, with monks working, guests arriving, and the whole site buzzing with purpose.
I've genuinely just had one of the most weirdest experiences I think I've ever had doing TVI. A guy drove past as I was walking down to Abbey Farm here, and he shouted out the window, "Get off the road." Does he not see the footpath I'm standing on? I'm not on the road. Weirdo. Anyway, right, okay, next we need to drive down this road actually, because effectively, apart from Merevale Hall, we're done with Merevale. But there is something else I want to put on the map, which is outside of the parish boundaries. Let's go and find that. So now we're driving again, this time to get to the entrance of the massive Merevale Hall. On the way though, we'll make a stop at a boatyard which is just outside the parish boundaries. It's actually in the southeastern corner of Grendon, but it makes more sense to cover it here. So this is Baddesley Basin on the Coventry Canal, which once played a big part in moving coal around North Warwickshire. The canal reached Atherstone in 1771, then pushed on to Fazeley in 1789. Once that link opened, this basin grew fast. The basin was tied directly to Baddesley Colliery. A small industrial railway once ran between the pit and the water, carrying loaded wagons straight to the boats. These days, Baddesley Basin is used as a boatyard, with boats moored up and repairs happening through the year. It's a lot quieter than it used to be, but you can still picture the old days when coal boats lined the water and the whole place moved at a steady, busy pace. The land around the Still Basin belongs to the Merevale and the Blythe estate, despite this not actually being within Merevale's boundaries. Right, we've got a couple of locks here on the canal. There's one behind the camera, I'm not quite sure what number that is, but the one you can see over there, that's lock number 6, with the road to Atherstone going over the top of it.
There's a lock on the basin, which acts like the gateway between the basin and the rest of the Atherstone flight. Boats drop down here as they head toward Polesworth and Fazeley. The canal reached the top of the Atherstone flight in 1771, but money ran out fast. Work stopped, and everything below the top locks sat unfinished for years. Lock 7 and the lower stretch were finally built in the late 1780s. The Atherstone locks have a bit of a reputation. They empty fast, but fill slowly, which can test your patience on a busy day. Lock 7 is built in red brick using English bond, just like the other locks nearby. It has big sandstone coping blocks on top, cut from local Warwickshire quarries. Back in the early 1800s, engineers added side ponds to help save water, because coal boats were using the flight non-stop. The ponds let the lock reuse water instead of wasting it, which made a huge difference.
Of course, one of the biggest changes to the basin in the past few decades has been the route of the A5. The road now sits right over the top of what was once a busy interchange where railways and waterways collided. You would never guess how big it used to be now. If you look close enough, you can see where the railway line once ran. The Baddesley Colliery Railway was a short but hard-working line that ran from the colliery on Baxterley Common to the canal. The route dropped through Waste Hill, crossed what is now the A5 and ended right beside the water. People think the earliest version of it might have been a simple horse-drawn tramway dating from around 1871. As the pit grew though, the railway grew too. Steam engines took over, the track got heavier and the whole thing turned into a proper industrial line. The steep slope made the line unusual. Loaded wagons rolled downhill under tight brakes. Going back up was the tough part. The engines pushed empty wagons uphill, fighting the gradient the whole way. Now, rail fans love this line because of one engine, William Francis. It was a huge Bayer Garrett locomotive, one of only 2 ever used on a private British colliery line. It arrived in 1937 and stayed for life. Today it's preserved at the Bressingham Steam Museum in Norfolk. By the time the colliery closed and was levelled in 1989, the railway had already fallen silent. You can still walk parts of it today. Locals call it the Paddy Line, and the old trackbed survives as a footpath. You can follow it from Waste Lane down towards the basin.
Right, so all of that there at the basin was a bit of a bonus. That's not within Merevale, but this last thing definitely is. Now, we can't see this ourselves because it's a private house. It's on a massive private estate. Behind me there, you can see we've got the lodges, and if you were to go through that gate between them, it would take you to Merevale Hall. Amelia's on this, and here it is to finish.
We can't leave this one without a section on Merevale Hall, a huge building no matter what angle you look at it from. Rebuilt in 1840 in an Elizabethan style by Edward Blore, it still feels bold and confident on its hill, dominating the massive Merevale estate around it. The place has towers, cupolas, big bay windows and a central square tower. It's the private home of the Dugdale baronets, and has been so for a long time. The hall stands within 185 hectares of land with long views across 3 counties. the land has a long past. After the abbey closed, the land went to Sir Walter Devereux in 1540. Things changed again in 1601 when the Crown seized the estates after Robert Devereux, the second Earl of Essex, was executed. The land was later bought by Edward Stratford in 1649, and the Stratford family made it their seat. In 1767, Penelope Stratford married Richard Geest, who had inherited Blythe Hall. He later took the Dugdale surname, linking the two estates together. The family line continued, and the Dugdales later became Dugdale baronets. The hall you see now replaced an older 17th century house. William Stratford Dugdale wanted something grander, so he had the old house rebuilt in monumental style. Parts of the earlier building were kept inside the new design. The grounds were laid out in 1842 by W.A. Nesfield, who was a big name in Victorian garden design. Terraces, lawns, and planned views all sit around the house, making the whole place feel carefully arranged. The estate also includes lakes such as Merevale Lake, Black Pool, and Abbey Pool, all first created by the monks for fishing. The hall is private, so you cannot go inside, but the history around it is huge, almost as huge as the building itself.
Our time in Merevale has taken us through a place that looks tiny on a map but carries a lot more weight than it really should. You get the long lane, the scattered houses, the farm, and then the huge estate that seems to stretch forever. The whole place began in 1148 with monks building ponds, halls, and a chapel for visitors. The Gate Chapel still opens its doors each week, which is rare enough to make you stop and think. Then you look up the hill to Merevale Hall, rebuilt in 1840, towering over the estate. And it's that hall that pulls your eye. It's quiet, but it's full of detail. One has to wonder why the Dugdales needed such a massive pad. Mind you, I guess when you're powerful and wealthy, size and space comes as standard. See you later all.
Merevale sits west of Atherston, where an abbey still keeps its claim. Built in 1148 by Ferrers' will, with Arden's woods in frame.
Kings rode in, Edward I and III, calling at the monks' old hall.
Henry Tudor here gathered his men,
ready for Bosworth's call.
Merevale, your chapel stands,
Your glass still glows with age,
tree of Jesse shining bright.
set in a timeless stage.
Dissolution swept through the cloistered rooms, 1538 drew near.
Walls fall down round Abbey Farm,
Yet fragments still appear.
Devereux took the estate in hand till Essex met his fate.
Crown stepped in when rebellion broke,
Seizing the house and gate.
Merevale, your chapel stands,
Your glass still glows with age,
tree of Jesse shining bright.
set in a timeless stage.
Dugdale's name began its run with William's loyal stand.
Royalist robes and treasured work kept safe within the land.
Coal brought wealth in 1836,
the hall began to rise.
Lord designed a stately home
That still meets our modern eyes.
garden spread with Nesfield's touch,
Terraces set with care,
a lake laid out in 37,
shining in the open air.
Merevale, your chapel stands,
Your glass still glows with age,
tree of Jesse shining bright.
set in a timeless stage.
Merevale, your chapel stands,
Your glass still glows with age,
tree of Jesse shining bright.
set in a timeless stage.
Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.